Another edition of the Lion Country Kia Goon and Ironhead show. As the dear Goon is, if anybody finds his voice, if you could just pass that right back to him, it would be greatly appreciated.
It's a true medical curiosity. The Goon is fine. He's not sick. He's got no symptoms. Well, yeah.
I mean,
maybe in the head. He's not physically ill. But no voice.
Yeah, it's just... Boy, that's a weird...
Which is a pity because I know he's got a lot to say about a variety of topics we'll touch on today. So he's going to be jumping online. Whenever Goon sends a comment, we'll make sure we post it up on the screen, react to it as is befitting. But, yeah, man, Ironhead, it's an absolutely singular edition of silly season in 2021.
Yes, it has been absolutely bizarre. Let's start with Penn State and the end of the regular season here with Michigan State, and another game which Penn State, I mean, it's there for the taking, and there are a few things about the game. Obviously, the turnovers were devastating. I mean, how many times do you hear coaches and anybody who follows or participates in football, if the two teams are fairly even, and these teams were pretty even in terms of the overall talent and the chemistry and all of that, turnovers are going to be the difference. And Penn State made a couple of critical ones at absolutely the wrong time. But the two other things that I think stood out to me, and again, you take the turnovers away, I think Penn State wins the game. Period. And the other things are still talked about as they have been all season. But the lack of the running game is just, and you could hear it in James Franklin's voice in the post-game press conference, and that is about as short as I've seen him with the media. So which I think just speaks to his frustration right now with the overall situation.
I got some stats for you on the run game. Whenever you're ready for them, let me know. I'll hit you.
Yeah, I think we can go right into it, but. There's a couple of things that are tangential to that that I just. I'm wondering right now where Penn State goes. James Franklin obviously is not going anywhere, at least not for a little while. So I think we can put that safely to bed. And I have to tell you, in today's world of college football, having that relative, and listen, who knows? Maybe Notre Dame comes in and says, "Here's $200 million, James. Come on over," and he bolts after all of this anyway. But I don't think so.
Hey, if they want to give Penn State $12 million,
yes. For one thing, you combine the buyout with the momentum right now, which is against James Franklin with the last two seasons' results. As we had talked about earlier, I just can't imagine that LSU fans or now Notre Dame fans would be jumping up and down at the opportunity to get James Franklin. And that does not mean, by the way, that I don't think James Franklin could be successful anywhere else. But but listen, I do think it is a good situation to have in terms of that stability at the top right now for Penn State. And again, as assured as you can be at this point that at least for the near future, that is going to remain the case. Because, again, I don't remember, unless maybe I'm just suffering the short-term memory. We always think what we're seeing at the moment is the best or the craziest or the greatest or the worst. I don't remember, and maybe it happened just a couple of years ago and I'm just blanking on it. I don't remember a year in which you had two top, I think we would all agree, two of the top six programs, not just this season, but this season too, but two of the top six programs over the last 5-6 years are Oklahoma and Notre Dame.
Right.
I mean, and to have two coaches from among the top six programs bolt for certainly terrific programs historically and traditionally, but I don't know that either of those you look at on paper and say, boy, that is a clear jump up. James Franklin talks all the time, like Brent Pry leaving to take the head coaching job at Virginia Tech. Yeah, you don't want to see Brent Pry go. He's been a terrific coordinator, but you sit back and say, well, no, good for him. That makes sense. Clearly a step up from defensive coordinator at Penn State to head coach at a historically good program at Virginia Tech. So, you wish him well, and you obviously hope that Penn State now is able to, as it has been, able to cultivate a situation where it is going to be able to bring in a very good defensive coordinator that'll generate some buzz as well. But to have two coaches, again, Brian Kelly going to LSU, and that one to me is the bigger reach just in terms of the recruiting component, because Notre Dame to some extent sells itself to the recruits that Notre Dame sells to, right? Like there's, I mean, there's, if you're interested in Notre Dame, it's likely in large part because there's some, family interest there, or you've just grown up a Notre Dame fan, or, you understand the tradition there. And again, I'm not saying Brian Kelly's not a good recruiter. I'm not saying he can't recruit in the SEC. Obviously, he had a good track record before Notre Dame, but it's different in the SEC, right? and I get that, part of that difference is the standards, and it's nothing against LSU, but the standards to get somebody in school at LSU are not what it is at Notre Dame. So from a talent perspective, it may be easier to get some more questionable academic kids in, academically oriented kids in than at Notre Dame, or at Notre Dame rather than at LSU, but to get more athletically oriented kids in at LSU. But again, his whole history has been in that kind of Midwestern part of the country, and that can be a benefit, obviously, on the recruiting trail, even in the SEC. But I'm really curious to see how Brian Kelly does at LSU.
Let me toss out a stat
looks
for
like
you
the
here.
bigger reach.
Listen to this. So, over the last 30 years, there have been 12 instances of a coach winning at least 11 games in his final season at the helm of a Power 5 school. Of those 12, 5 left for the NFL. 5 either retired or they resigned due to like NCAA violations, scandals, etc.
Yeah.
And 2 took a job at a different college football program. Both of those 2 are Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly leaving Cincinnati for Notre Dame, which totally understandable. And then this situation where he leaves a Notre Dame team that could, based on how things play out this weekend, be in the playoffs. They could be a playoff team, and he jumped ship for what is reportedly an ungodly sum of money at LSU. Now, we're not sure what it is. I've heard anywhere between $10 to $15 million a year. Nick Saban makes $10 million a year. When he got that contract, that was supposed to cap the market at look, nobody is this guy. Yep. This is the one guy who's worth this. Now, like any bum off the street is getting 10 mil. Like, what's Nick Saban worth now? 25? Yeah. It's nuts and unsustainable, I think.
And I don't know. I mean, and I never will know, but what is the difference at the end of the day? And I get it's $2 or $3 million, but once you're like, if you're making $7 or $8 million versus $10 million in terms of your lifestyle and setting your future generations up and all of that, right? I mean, it's more of an ego thing at that point.
Right? Like the taxes,
for sure. Now,
right?
Yeah, I will say that the situation with Lincoln Riley, like you have to, and Stanford, it was interesting. I didn't know. Maybe this is widely known, and I was just the idiot that didn't know it. But at Stanford, one of the things they do, they set up housing for their coaches. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know about football. I'm sure it's available for football,
right?
But like the other coaches, there's like a housing community for the Stanford coaches that is paid for by the university, so that these guys aren't trying to on top of everything else. Now, again, the salaries obviously for and Stanford has like Penn State, a very broad-based program. So obviously you're not, paying the hundreds of thousands of dollars for your swimming and diving coach, no matter how good they may be, or track and field coach and those sorts of things. So one of the things they do is subsidize the housing, and pretty nice situation for those coaches. And talking with when we were out there, talking with the wrestling coaches, but so yeah, correct. It's 10 million doesn't go as far in Los Angeles as it does, say, in Tuscaloosa.
Well, and when you see James agreeing to make, between $7 to $8 million a year, like he does live in State College. For schlubs who make State College money like you and me, like the housing market here has kind of gotten a little bit off the rails. But if you're pulling down $8 million a year in State College, you can buy a lot of house versus what you could buy if you were in Southern California, for example.
Or New York City or something like that. So,
and if you're a coach in Florida, you're not paying any income tax, right? So it does change a little bit.
Sure.
But, again, to your point, having never made 10 or 7 or $1 million a year, like,
and listen, I
kind of think that way too, but
yeah. And that's not. I'm not begrudging.
Says you're worth.
Yeah,
right?
and I'm not begrudging anybody, and I don't. I don't really have a problem with the. I just think it's bizarre, but I also think it's kind of the part of the new world we're entering, where like you just couldn't have imagined a Bo Schembechler or a Woody Hayes or Joe. Even when Joe Paterno was in the 70s, considering going, it was going pro. It wasn't going, hey, let me look at this Ohio State job if it opens up, or look at like the top tier, and top tier meaning like the top 10 for sure, and probably top 20 coaches. It was pretty rare that those guys were jumping ship for another program that again in the case of both Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, they're going to programs that are right at the moment clearly less than the programs that they are. Now I get the potential. LSU won a national title, which Notre Dame hasn't done just a couple of years ago, and I think the talent is there. From a my question with Kelly is the recruiting at LSU. I will say I think LSU is going to be very, very competitive right out of the gate next year, because I think the talent is there. I think some things were happening internally there under Orgeron that were scratching the surface of, and what we've learned publicly. But I think that was infiltrating into the locker room and kind of affecting how some things were playing out there. But just from a talent standpoint, that LSU roster is still pretty stocked at the moment. I think you get Brian Kelly in there, and if everybody's buying in, and I don't know why you wouldn't with what he brings to the table here in terms of a track record. I think LSU could be right there.
The
next
one
year.
thing LSU can claim when they are trying to hire a coach better than any program in America is our program's brand equity allows you to steal a national championship in a year when things go off the rails. I'm serious. So they have 3 titles this century. And if you think about them, the Nick Saban title in 2003 was a split title with USC. And it was the only time when you had a BCS champion not voted the AP title.
Yes.
I think I'm almost positive the AP voted USC. I think that's the only time they split from the winner of the BCS. Then you had the Les Miles team. They had 2 losses. Crazy, like almost unheard of to have a 2-loss national champion. Yeah. And then, obviously that team that Ed Orgeron put together in 2019, like Goon says this, and I don't know, who am I to question a guy who actually played on the 94 Penn State offense, but it still feels like blasphemy for me to say it's an even better offense than that 94
I'm team. With you, but it was an amazing offense, no question.
But even that was like a perfect storm, lightning in a bottle. Like like Joe Burrow just kind of falls into their lap because of the whole situation with Justin Fields in Georgia and him going to Ohio State. Crazy circumstances, but if you go there and all the, like everything is going off the rails in college football, nobody has pushed through the pile into the end zone more often than LSU. I think the USC's value proposition is way more point A to point B. Like, I'm sure they basically went to Lincoln Riley and said, listen, number one, here's a huge pile of money. Number two, you guys are going into the SEC. So, like, coming here is basically going from current Oklahoma to future Oklahoma, which is the program best set up to dominate a crappy conference and keep going to the playoffs as a result.
Yep. No, I think that's exactly right. And you don't have to test the waters if you're looking Riley at the SEC now to maintain a pretty consistent run into the college football playoffs. So, and obviously the recruiting base. I will say that match feels like a better, well, I don't know about better, a more natural fit, because Lincoln Riley, you look at that Oklahoma roster, that the number of recruits he has from Southern California that have made an impact in Norman. So that feels like a pretty natural transition, or a pretty easy transition.
Let me ask you a question about Lincoln Riley at USC. Do you think this is the first splash hire by USC in our lifetime? Like, USC has this idea that they are one of these top brands and the glitz and glamour of LA. I think this is the first time they have really gone out and gotten the guy who grabs
very
headlines.
Established.
Yeah, like, because Pete Carroll, when he went there, he was a two-time loser in the NFL.
Well, even John Robinson, I mean, going all the way back. Robinson, that obviously was tremendous at USC, but wasn't like he was, racking up huge victories elsewhere. So, I'm trying to.
Like when they brought him back, to me, it almost felt more desperate than like some grand sweeping move. And Lane Kiffin was probably the closest you can say, because you plucked them from an SEC school.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, here's a guy got rejected from the Al Davis clown car, had 1 year at a program that hadn't been relevant in over a decade, and was just, like, I don't know, what they win, like 8 or 9 games? Like,
they had
nothing that when you were like, oh my God,
Lane
Kiffin going to USC equals national titles. I think this is the first time that, for all their bluster over the years, their hire has really matched their idea of themselves, which means it's high risk, high reward. If it works, man, it's really going to work. But if it doesn't, if you're USC, where do you go? Where do you go from there?
No, this is definitely an all-in move by the university and the athletic department. So all of that, I'm getting sidetracked from my original. Like I said, we're going to open up with Penn State, Michigan State talk. Here's the thing with the Penn State offense and the running game in particular. If you're James Franklin right now, where are you looking? Is it just at the off? I mean, and yes, in the mirror. But listen, I mean, I do think he genuinely does that at the end of each season. Where can I get better? How do I need to improve? I think he does, and I think most even decent coaches do that at the end of each season. So, without being smart alecky about it, because you. To your point with splash hires as a head coach at USC, Penn State has had back-to-back splash hires at offensive coordinator, right? I mean, Shiraka had a tremendous momentum anyway and reputation, right? And there were a lot of people that were, I think, clamoring to get him. And again, there were a lot of circumstances that I think went into some of which I don't think we still know or ever will know. I think there was something more than just the lack of offensive continuity for whatever reason. There wasn't a fit there.
There was for sure a chemistry issue with the staff. Yeah, there's no question.
So, Mike Yursich comes in, and I don't know if maybe I'm reading too much into, and again, James Franklin, as any coach coming off of that loss and after this season, I mean, you understand he's frustrated, he's going to be short. But it was palpable, the frustration he has with the running game or lack thereof again this season. Well,
let me hit you with these numbers.
It sounded like both he and Yursich were and even some of the comments from some of the players after the game, it's like it makes you think that and maybe I'm reading too much into it. I think the players felt very confident with the pass game. I'm not saying you abandon the run, but it felt like they were going to it a little too much in the second half, given the success they were having, even in the snow, with the pass game.
Yeah.
And the lack of success. And I get they hit some big runs. And hindsight is always 20/20. And, if the execution is there and they hit a couple of those runs. But I guess my question is, what do you think right now? Because I'm not sure if you're James Franklin, are you going to make another move here at offensive coordinator?
No,
which does not feel like the right thing. Or do you sit down with Yurcich and, hey, we've got to come up with a better scheme? Or is it just that Penn State still is not developing offensive linemen and or running backs? Now, the running backs, I mean, the recruiting, for whatever it's worth, the recruiting analysts will tell you that Penn State has brought in a bevy of big-time backs. And listen, I was glad that they went, fumble notwithstanding. I like that they went with Kevon Lee, and I think he's been the most consistent throughout the course of the season. And again, I get it. Turnover absolutely killed this team's chances of winning that game on Saturday. But I still like that they went with him. And I did think, even though it was not consistent and it was not good enough, I think he shows the most consistency of being a good and maybe even big-time back. But for a starting quarterback that's been there 3 years. I mean, this offense ranked in the 80s, right? Nationally, I'm talking 82nd. About. Yeah, yep. I mean that is for a third-year starting quarterback. That is really disappointing, and especially when you add into it, one of the top receivers in the country, and I think that receiving core as a whole, obviously Parker Washington with his highlight film catch on Saturday, but he's developed as a clear big-time number 2 in that offense. And I think the other receivers, again, the receiving core, and I know the tight ends had a stretch there with drop balls, but I think it's a good tight end core as well, at least on the receiving end of it. And so, I don't know if you're James Franklin, if you're just putting this all on the offensive line, or is it player development within the system that you're getting the recruits? And again, if it's player development, that goes back to your coaches and your overall system. Where is it that you're looking? I mean, obviously, that has to improve if Penn State is going to get where it wants to get for James Franklin's new contract. But I'm really curious to see what the approach is here in the offseason in terms of, okay, how do we address, Penn State, address this clear flaw that is, and we can go through the numbers here, but I mean, it's been a problem that just has not been fixed all season long.
So you brought up the overall offense ranks 82nd in FBS. This century, here are the offenses that ranked below the 2021 Nittany Lions. 2001, 5-7 record. We were 85th in the country. 2004, 5-6 in 2001. 4-7 in 2004. We ranked 113th. Ugh. So dark times at the beginning of the 2000s for the Nittany Lions. Then you get up to the 2011 team, which still won 9 games and was in position to go to the Big Ten championship game before the thing. Bad offense, 110th. Okay, averaged only 19.3 points per game. And then the only other offenses that ranked below this year's were the 14 and 15 offenses where you're just coming off the sanctions and you have 65 scholarship players. So this was a historically underperforming offense, and the run game head was absolutely the culprit. Penn State averaged 106 yards per game on the ground, which is the second worst since 2000. Only the 2014 team was worse than that. They also averaged 3.1 yards per carry, which is the worst. Since 2000, it's never been that bad, and couldn't even average 1 touchdown per game. 0.9 TDs on the ground per game, the worst since the 2000 season.
And lots of opportunities, by the way, in those games. I mean, they had lots of opportunities to cash in with short runs that could have finished off drives.
Kevon Lee and Noah Cain combined for 6 touchdowns on the ground. Kevon Lee, the leading rusher, 2 rushing TDs, the worst in the last 22 years for a Penn State rushing leader. But the 6 touchdowns of Cain and Lee combined would be better only than Kevon Lee last year in a 9-game season.
Yeah.
And Michael Robinson playing running back in 2003. So, it just bad, historically bad. And in answer to your question, I think it is genuinely true that there is blame to go around. I think a lot of it needs to fall on the tailbacks. Like they could hold on to the ball.
Yeah.
They didn't have great vision. They didn't have great burst. And they didn't get yardage after contact. They couldn't break tackles.
And, it was kind of standing out to me in the Michigan State game. And I'd have to go back. I'm not one of these guys that goes back and watches the games over and over during the week. There was a time when I did that, but I don't these days. But on Saturday, Kevon Lee was falling forward fairly often.
Yeah.
I don't remember that happening with any Penn State back with any consistency. I'm not saying it didn't happen at any point during the season, but man, I'm telling you, these guys, it feels like, at least just watching the game again, one time through and with the naked eye, boy, it did not feel like there were a lot of yards after contact. And again, you go back over the history of Penn State football. I mean, Blair Thomas and Kajana Carter and obviously, Curtis Enos, but those guys are more often than not, right? They get hit and they're at least falling forward and getting that extra yard or 2. Man, it felt like this team, these backs this year, when they got hit, they got driven back.
Yeah.
Pretty consistently. And again, not pinning that all on them because, again, if you're getting hit 2 yards in the backfield, you don't have a head of steam to get going. And that certainly happened too often. But even when they were, in open field, man, a lot of times they got driven back. Like, I just don't feel like I don't know if it's just they're not running low enough and getting their pads down. I mean, I don't know enough. Again, I'm not watching it closely enough these days to go back and fairly analyze that. But
so
it feels like they are not doing enough.
Right. Like, we know that guy does not have great top end speed.
Yeah, he's not a Kajana Carter type of back.
By no means. He flourished in Kirk Shiraka's run scheme last year, which did do more like put guys at the line of scrimmage, create opportunities for him to get into the second level without being contacted than this year's offense did. Noah Cain, I think, just has not looked right all season compared to the healthy version we saw of him in 2019.
Agreed.
I think just injuries have stacked up for him.
Yeah.
John Lovett never really showed the breakaway speed that he flashed at Baylor. I mean, maybe there was a reason that he fell out of favor there and ended up in the transfer portal. And then, the other 2 guys, Devin Ford, I think, has been given plenty of opportunities. Has never really realized his potential. I expected to see more Keziah Holmes this year. He seems to have just been lost in the mix. So in terms of where do you look, I think, you hope, number one, to have I think I'm a big believer in stability. I don't like that you just keep changing out coaches every time something goes wrong. I don't want to see Phil Troutwine fired. I don't want to see any changes with the OC. Give them another year to try to figure it out. Landon Tengwall played very well. You're hoping to get Salim Wormley, who was supposed to be a starter, back from injury.
Yeah.
The transfer portal is there, and Notre Dame, which beat us out for a couple of O-line recruits, some of whom have not cracked their starting lineup. They might be interested in maybe making a shift. And you're bringing in a guy who I think checks off all the boxes in Nick Singleton that you don't currently have in the running back room.
Yes.
So again, I think it's just a combination. And these tight ends are going to have another year where they can get more comfortable with what they're being asked to do. To credit T. Frank and Coach Caduti for the bloggy. Both those guys do a great job breaking down film, especially in the first third of the season. A lot of the failure in the run game was that you had these young tight ends, right? Brent and Strange, really only in his second year as a contributor. Theo Johnson had to step in late in 2020 as a true freshman. They were just asked to do entirely different things in Mike Yursic's scheme than they were for Kirk Shiraka, and they changed their position coach in the offseason. Again, I think stability is the number one factor, plus bringing in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I think either one of those true freshman tailbacks next year might pull a Saquon Barkley and then fight for snaps right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think that's all very possible and maybe even likely as we sit here today. And I'm with you. I don't. I think part of the problem here with the offense the last couple of seasons is exactly that it's been too unstable, too many changes, too many, both with players and, the personnel and then the staff and even the system. And, I'm not sure, and this isn't necessarily Mike Yursic's fault or Sean Clifford's fault, but Sean Clifford is not the style quarterback that Mike Yurcich would like to have in the offense. And again, I think, you adjust to what you have, and that's what, if you're a good coach, that you take what you have. But I also think, and again, I'm not here to bash Sean Clifford, but Sean Clifford is not, to go back to James Franklin's terminology, an elite quarterback. He is a tough as nails, terrific competitor, all the things that you want from your kid and leadership and in the core values and all of that. But from a talent standpoint, right, and even, the development standpoint, and again, understandably, I think, very understandably, in defense of Sean Clifford, you have a different offensive coordinator each season. Yes,
and the OC
said earlier,
was also the quarterback's coach every single time, so a different position coach.
Yeah, so I said earlier, third-year starter, you're not seeing what you want to see out of that. But again, in defense of Sean Clifford, but there were just seemingly every game. I'm sure there were a couple of exceptions, but he was good most of the game. And there were always a couple of plays, 2 or 3, where you're like, oh, my gosh, what does he do? Either lack of recognition, not making the right read at all. And again, it felt like those were plays that were largely difference makers. And am I pinning the lack of success in the offense on Sean Clifford? No, I think it squarely goes back to the running game. I think Sean Clifford did plenty to get this team 10 wins anyway this season. So I'm not pinning it on Clifford. But what I am telling you is if you put an elite quarterback, one of the top, Sean Clifford was never one of the top 5 or 10 quarterbacks in the country. Mm-hmm. I think if you get at least a top 10 quarterback in here, with even with the rest of the flaws, I think that this team has. I think there are some more wins. And listen, Clifford, I don't know how healthy he was at any point after that Iowa game.
Right.
Again, in defense of him, I'm not sure that we ever saw in the second half of the season the true version of Sean Clifford. But just too many mistakes made in key situations, I think, for this team to, again, be able to overcome the other flaws that it clearly had. The other thing that was just a killer against Michigan State was how many times did Penn State get Michigan State in 3rd and long? And then, even you have 4th and 15. And listen, I don't even know – at the end of the day, and I know fans never want to hear this, but sometimes you do have to just tip your cap to the opponent. There was good coverage on the 4th and 15 touchdown that ultimately won the game for Michigan State. The coverage is good. The defense, I think the defensive scheme was fine. It was an unbelievable throw and a borderline miraculous catch. I mean, just a great job. And, again, it sucks if you're Penn State, but I don't know that Michigan State makes that play very often. And I will say Michigan State's running game obviously is their bread and butter, but, man, when they need – Thorne is a terrific quarterback in terms of knowing what his role is in that offense. Yep. And when they needed him to deliver, he delivered. Right?
The thing that has impressed me about him, honestly, since he started playing for them last season as a relatively young player, I can't remember whether he was a true or a redshirt freshman when he played last year, but it was his first game action towards the end of 2020. He is, going back to the conversation, he's not an elite quarterback or anything close to it, but he's good enough, and he's got good sense of how long he can sit in the pocket and look down. He doesn't bolt the pocket too much. And on that 4th and 15 play, and a lot of those, 3rd and long conversions, the stat that sticks out to me for Penn State is the goose egg in the sack column.
Yep.
We would have been in deep doo-doo if Arnold Ebiketie hadn't come here from Temple, because I do want to shout him out. His 9.5 sacks for the program this year are the most we have had since Carl Nassib's 15.5 sack season in 2015. And it's actually 8th all time in single season sack totals for Penn State. Huge bonus to get him. But as you started to lose defensive tackles and had to ask some of the younger guys to put in more time, like any kind of disruption in the interior line, any kind of genuine pass pressure opposite Ebiketie just wasn't there. And I think we just gave Thorne, a guy who is already pretty good at staying comfortable back there, we just gave him a little bit too much time to throw.
Yeah, and I think his instincts are very good. And there's again, I'm not bashing Sean Clifford, but there are just times where it's just frustrating because it feels like he should feel that pressure and just at least get rid of the ball understand. And he just eats it too often. And again, many contributing factors to that. I'm not pinning that even all on Clifford himself, but on the flip side, I do think, and I'm sure fans are tired of, and I don't know if Goons is bullish looking ahead now as we've been all season, but I actually still am, because I go back to this, and we'll never know, and it doesn't do any good necessarily to play out the hypothetical of if Clifford doesn't get hurt, but it sure feels like there's at least 2 more wins in there, and probably 3 from my estimation, if Sean Clifford is healthy, relatively more healthy. Quite possibly. But I mean, I think you're at least talking about a 9-win team going for a 10th win in a bowl game. Worst case scenario, if Sean Clifford is healthy, relatively healthy throughout the season. I don't know that anybody's truly completely healthy throughout the year, but I mean, if he doesn't suffer the rib injury or whatever it was against Iowa, and again, I think that clearly affected him the better part of the rest of the season.
Look, Cade McNamara is not a mobile guy for Michigan, and they managed to keep him upright. So it's possible to protect a pocket passer through a 12-game season, and have we done that, I'm with you.
Well, so the other thing is, unlike the Steelers, Penn State was in every game it played this season, right? Like, it was competitive. I mean, you had at least, even in Ohio State, like midway through the 4th quarter of every game, you're like, there is a scenario, there is a path to victory. And in 4 of them, I mean, it was a pretty simplistic path.
We had a 4th quarter lead
victory
in 12 games this year.
So
and we finished 7-5.
Yeah. So that opportunity. God. So if you're looking at it from the glass half full perspective, right? It's okay. We eliminate a couple of mistakes, a couple of turnovers here, which the turnover this was not a team that was plagued by, other than the running game, the lack of a running game. It wasn't consistent problems that you saw throughout the season, right? I mean, Iowa was just, Penn State was going to hammer Iowa that night, if not for the injury to Clifford. And it was, whether it was the preparation or just the quarterback not responding the way they were expecting, whatever. I mean, that one, to me, you just kind of put aside, because I don't think, to me, it wasn't anything else. Now, if you had a dominant run game to fall back on in that Iowa game, right?
Sure.
Or not even dominant. If you had a decent run game against Iowa, Penn State still wins that game, even with the quarterback situation. And obviously, same thing with Illinois at the very least. So I think if you go back and, again, you correct a couple of mistakes in each of the, really even the Ohio, in all 5 of those games, right? And different mistakes in many of those games, you're talking about the potential for an undefeated team. Well, the hope is you're going through, and listen, we'll see how many. There are some decisions to be made here in terms of who's going to be returning next year as well. But for the guys that went through this year, now you've had back-to-back seasons, front end of 2020, back end of 2021, and the back end of 2021 even more so, I think, frustrating, because the front end of 2020 was just a disaster. I mean, it wasn't a play or two here or there that was going to make a difference. It was just a disaster. This thing, I think you can genuinely go back and say, listen, you hang on to the ball here, you reach up and bat the ball there. You do. I mean, you're this close. And I think you can genuinely, as a coaching staff, go to your kids and say, listen, we make 1 or 2 more plays in each of these games, you guys are going to be playing for a national title next year, right? Like, that's not crazy pie in the sky. And we've seen plenty of teams over the years, both at Penn State and throughout the country, do that, right? Come off of 4 or 5 lost seasons where, again, if you're competitive and you have talent, and listen, there's an influx of talent coming in as well next year, right?
I mean, Michigan is doing that as we speak.
Yeah. And so, I want to get to that too, because the one thing I did not see coming, and maybe I should have, but I didn't, in that Michigan-Ohio State game is, and the biggest thing for Penn State to get where it wants to be is, it's just got to be a tougher football team.
Yeah.
Like, you have got to be, and I'm talking about, again, when it's 3rd and 2, like, you just have to, that is to some extent just will.
Yep.
Right? Like, you just have got to, it's like a hockey team digging out the puck. Sometimes it's not even about the talent. Talent helps. Talent can be the difference maker. But sometimes it is, nope, we're just going to be tougher. And Penn State wasn't too often in the bigger games this season. What was really impressive to me in that Michigan-Ohio State game, Michigan was by far the more physical football team. And we haven't seen that in that series, even when Michigan won the last time. I'm not sure it's because Michigan was the more physical team.
No, that Ohio State team stunk. That 2011 Ohio State team, they were terrible.
But this was this was Michigan just saying, we're going to be tougher than you. We're meaner than Ohio State, and we're going to go out and take it to you. And they did.
I talk about Penn State being a play away from beating Michigan, and we were. But I also believe then, and believe even more now after watching that Ohio State-Michigan game last weekend, that a big part of that is because Blake Corum did not play against Penn State. With what they're doing, the physicality and that 1-2 punch of Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum out of their backfield, if you are not built to stand up against an offense like that, which incidentally Alabama and Georgia both are, so we'll see, even to a lesser extent Iowa. But if you are like Ohio State's defense, which is kind of like Penn State's defense, like more of a finesse speed defense built to stop a spread offense, you are going to have some long days.
Yeah.
And those two guys look like they're both healthy now. Like Michigan's clicking on all cylinders, which I hate. It makes me sick.
I'm
just threw
with
up in
you.
my mouth.
And maybe we'll see what to me would be the biggest upset in Big Ten championship game history on Saturday. And I'd love to see it. I think there is as close to a 0% chance of a Big Ten team winning in that championship game as I can remember. Because I just don't think I was in the same league right now with the way these two teams are playing and the talent differential. Michigan is, and again, listen, the talent differential between Alabama and Auburn is also pretty significant. And how in the world Alabama keeps finding ways to win games like that is also one of the most confounding things
Tank
in
Bigsby
the world.
Running out of bounds. I was so mad after the Michigan State game, and then I'm watching the Iron Bowl, and I'm thinking about what it must have felt like to be an Auburn fan. And I was like, you know what? I feel pretty good about myself.
And again, it's college kids, and you're caught up in the moment and all of that, but the situational awareness or lack thereof in that, you're absolutely right. Like, and I'm with you. I mean, I'm screaming at the TV because I'm wanting Auburn just because I want as much chaos. I mean, I don't have any, and it obviously helps Penn State look better too if Auburn wins that game. So, but more, I'm just wanting to see as much chaos and get different teams in the mix here for the playoffs. And when he goes out of bounds, it's beyond aggravating because you knew it gave Alabama a chance. And listen, I'm still thinking, okay, but 97 yards or whatever it was.
No timeouts.
The way Auburn's defense has been playing, and son of a gun, once they got that they hit that big play that got them into inside the 30, I'm like, they're going to end up winning this game. And then obviously, I mean, it didn't clinch it, and it was back and forth, and it is unbelievable to me how consistently Alabama pulls those types of games out where, again, they are clearly the better, clearly the more talented team, put themselves in a dangerous position. And again, they have lost some of those games over the years, but man, much more often than not. And it feels like every time when it is truly, if they are in danger of losing that second game that could take them out of playoff contention, they just do not lose those games, seemingly ever. It's amazing.
Florida was lousy. They almost beat them this year.
Yeah.
LSU was lousy. They almost beat them.
Well, and it does feel, and again, it's college sports and crazy things happen. What it feels like right now, and I've had so many feelings during the season that it did not play out. It feels like Georgia is up here right now, and then there's a bunch of other teams in that next tier. And I mean, like, we're going to have three teams, obviously, in the playoffs with Georgia. I don't think there's much separating two through, I'd have to look at it, but probably in that 11-12 range right now. Like, I don't think.
Yeah, that's fair.
We'll see how this all plays out, but I am going to be curious to see what happens here with Cincinnati and how some of these I'm really curious to see what the rankings are tonight. And listen, if Alabama had lost that game, we're talking about Notre Dame being 6, and if Alabama had lost that game, it virtually would assure Cincinnati, right? You're not taking a 3-loss Alabama, right? And I'm presuming
you're saying
Alabama.
So Cincy has to beat Houston, obviously, which, by the way, I don't think they're going to. But
I think that's a really. I'm kind of with you on that. I for a few different reasons, not the least of which is I'm not sure Luke Fickell's attention now is solely
there is
focused on this because I do think there's at least an eye toward Notre Dame if in fact that doesn't happen.
Very good point.
I think going to be discussions anyway, and I think Houston's a good team and a dangerous team, and I think Cincinnati, it's a different type of pressure when you start to realize, my God, we can actually have this, and that's just not a program that's used to that type of tension or pressure.
Yeah, if the same standard were applied to Alabama as is applied to every other team in FBS. Now, you can argue whether or not it should be or they've earned more grace or whatever, but if it was, A loss to Auburn with their performances against LSU and Florida and the loss to Texas A&M, who lost to LSU, that should have eliminated them. I do think that had they lost to Auburn and come back and beaten Georgia, they would still get in, right? But yeah, to your point, it made it. Now we don't know. They could lose to Georgia and very well still get in. I think they will. Actually, I think Alabama and Georgia are both going to go. So yeah, it changed the playoff picture. And if in fact there are two SEC teams and the Big Ten title game goes chalk, which again, fate is not without a sense of irony. Here we are after all the nonsense with the Iowa fans. I'm a huge Iowa Hawkeyes fan going into the Big Ten title game because screw Michigan. But if that goes chalk, I think there is a very, very good chance of Oklahoma State, as long as they look halfway decent, if they can win the Big 12 title game, I think they hop over Cincinnati. I really do.
Yeah,
which is terrible for those kids on that team. Because I think truly that sends a message that there's nothing you can do.
I agree with all of that. And I do think it's the playoffs do, and they will expand, but they need to. You need to, and I get that there's, no matter where you draw the line, there's always going to be an argument about, okay, the next team, if it's 8 teams, you're going to argue, all right, but look at 9 and 10. They should be in there. But if you at least get to 8, it feels to me like you at least get all of the teams that are clearly deserving.
Yeah.
Because every year it feels like there are legitimate arguments about anywhere between 5 and 7 teams that should be in the mix. It's rare that we're getting now. Again, this year I don't think there's much difference in terms of a 2 seed or a 12 seed this year, but when you look at the resumes, again, the argument between 8 and 9 or anything even after 6, I just think you eliminate the chance of a team looking as impressive as Cincinnati has throughout the season. And they have. I mean, they've had a couple of games that were closer than you'd like with their schedule and everything. But they had a couple of very good wins. Well, one really good win and a couple of decently impressive wins. And I do feel like that's a team, if it beats Houston, and I'm kind of with you. I'm thinking they're not going to.
Yeah.
But if they do, that team should be in there. I'm not sure whether or not they should be in there over in Oklahoma State if Oklahoma State wins big in the Big 12 championship game, but to me, it feels like that team should be in there. They should at least have that opportunity.
They're number 3 now. You're right now saying they're the 3rd best team in the country. And I couple it with this data point. Because you go back to 2014 when they jumped Ohio State over TCU.
Yeah.
Ohio State was 5th, right? Like they were still giving them a lot of credit for being a good team.
Yeah.
You've got Cincinnati at number 3, and go back to when Oklahoma was 9-0. They were ranked 8th, right? They were 8th or 9th.
Well,
and they were the highest ranked Big 12 team. So that was the committee clearly saying, we think so little of the Big 12 that you can be undefeated, and we're going to rank teams with a loss ahead of you that are playing in other conferences. So I don't understand how you could go from that to now saying, oh, well, because Oklahoma State won the Big 12, they should jump over both, because you got to jump them over Notre Dame, too, because the fly in the ointment is Cincy owns that head-to-head.
Yep.
And they have consistently – like they've disregarded head-to-head when it's convenient, but they have consistently kept Cincinnati ahead of the Fighting Irish because they own that head-to-head. Yeah. So you got to jump Oklahoma over 2 teams, one of which you said was number 3 in the country as recently as last week. Like I'm expecting it to happen if it plays out that way. But to me, that's just an admission that the whole thing is a monopolistic cartel rigged against the group of 5.
Yeah, and again, to me, it's one of the reasons they need the playoff expansion is that other than college football, there is no sport at any level where all of the teams that are in whatever division or league you're in don't have an opportunity to go play for the championship of that league, right? Like you start the season, it doesn't matter what division you're in the NFL. If you win your division, you go to the playoffs and, you take your chances and see what happens. Same thing with college basketball. I mean, any other, and that's just not the case. You do not control your own destiny in college football. And that's through no fault. Again, I guess, you could say it's your fault for going to Cincinnati. But again, if you're going to have these teams in the FBS division, then you at least need to give them the opportunity, in my mind, to have a chance to play for a championship. And again, there's only so much they can do about the schedule. And as we've talked about, Cincinnati went out and scheduled Notre Dame and beat Notre Dame. This isn't like...
And it's not their fault Indiana fell apart either.
Yeah.
It's like Indiana's been a great program, but they've been winning 6 or 7 games a year the last several years. And then all of a sudden, you think, oh, great, we're going to get 2 quality non-conference opponents. And Indiana just totally crumbles.
I will say Texas San Antonio now has officially been eliminated from my consideration. I was all ready to push.
How about that? Kevin...
That was bizarre too.
Kevin 2 weeks ago booked a flight to San Antonio so he could see the what conference are they in? Like a Sun Belt or something, Conference USA, whatever it was. He was going to go down and see undefeated UTSA play their championship game. So now the non-refundable airline tickets he's going.
Boy.
Less compelling trip. But to your point about what can Cincinnati do, the other thing I think people need to remember is they were just abysmally managed from a clock management perspective series at the end of the bowl game last year from beating Georgia.
Yeah.
And, look, football is a game of inches. They didn't win, but to me, they showed that they belonged in that conversation.
Yeah. And I just think it would be good for college football. And again, if I was an Oklahoma State fan, I'm sure I could pull out all kinds of legitimate reasons why Oklahoma State should be in there over Cincinnati. But I just, again, at some point, I think you have to recognize a team that it has the talent that Cincinnati has. And again, this isn't a team that is coming out of nowhere, right? Luke Fickell has built that program very solidly, as you said. They were right there with Georgia last year, and and again beat Notre Dame for Notre Dame's only loss this season. And I just think at some point you've got to reward a non-Power 5 team for doing everything it can to put itself in position to be in the college football playoffs. And listen, maybe this thing will just play out. Anyway, maybe Cincinnati hammers Houston and Iowa upsets Michigan, and no Big Ten team is in the college football playoffs. Who knows? It's who saw what happened last weekend, especially if Auburn had been able to hang on and take the victory that Alabama tried to give it. This would be a really wild. It's still going to be an interesting but man. You talk about a wide open after Georgia, wide open everything in college football and kind of a free for all.
And the Power 5 has, looking ahead, scraped off all the icing on the Group of 5 cake, right?
Yeah.
If you're saying, you worry about Cincinnati getting in the committee, he's not going to want to set a precedent. Look, the only other Group of 5 programs that are going to sniff being able to make a claim on playoff contention for the foreseeable future are Houston, probably, right? UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, those 4 teams that are going to the Big 12.
Yeah.
I don't see there's a big risk of setting a precedent that you're then going to have to honor, that a UTSA could make a claim on down the road. So, look, if they beat Houston, who is a good football team, and is 10-1 or 11-1, let them in.
Yeah,
let them play.
No, I would like to see it. I'm kind of with you and thinking that it may very well not occur. Real quickly, I will not be here Thursday because we will be traveling to Philadelphia for the Penn State Penn match at the Palestra on Friday night with live coverage on the Penn State Sports Network. But this will be a really intriguing weekend for Penn State wrestling if you are a wrestling fan. Penn has a really good team. 6 guys, I think, in the Intermat rankings, but 9 guys ranked by one service or another right now. And it is a really good dual meet team. The unfortunate thing from Penn's perspective is their strongest weights are weights that Penn State is also very strong. Cole Urbis, the state high product at 197, is going to face Gabe Dean, which is obviously a very tough proposition. Urbis just won outstanding wrestler, by the way, at the Keystone Classic at Penn, which is a very cool thing. And real quick, while we're at it, kudos and congratulations to the state high football team. A tremendous upset over Harrisburg and now in the state semifinals. And again, one of those things where they've put it together at the right time of the year, right? They're by far
that's what
playing
Cincinnati's saying. They're saying just let us in, right?
Exactly right. And listen, it's I know Mount Lebanon is rightfully a prohibitive favorite.
Yeah,
outside of it, listen, Harrisburg was a prohibitive favorite too.
No doubt.
This last week, so we'll see. The fact that they're in the state semifinals is just remarkable and very special stuff. And hats off to Matt Lentell and the staff for just a job extremely well done. But so this Penn match. Again, I think there's going to be some very good individual bouts. The matchups, just the strongest weights for Penn are probably 33, 97, and 74, which, Penn State has national champions at 2 of those weights and a national finalist at another. So pretty tough sledding if you're Penn. But I think it's going to be a very, very good test. And then Lehigh is off to a terrific start this season. I do think that's going to be a really good test for Penn State coming off of the Thanksgiving break then on Sunday. So this should be a good, challenging weekend for the Nittany Lions as they try to get things solidified here and get ready to make the trip to Niceville, Florida for that dual national dual tournament that they'll have on the 20th and 21st of December. And real quick, Booch, I'm encouraged by what we're seeing with Penn State basketball. The outside shooting is obviously when it's on, it is fun to watch. But the fight that they are showing, and I think, again, that chemistry is just going to keep getting better and better. There's just the awareness that they have. Again, you can see it improving from game to game here, and it feels like they are recognizing, oh, wait, we've seen this now before. This is – and it feels like they're getting more comfortable with the roles that they're each expected to play. I continue to be very impressed with Micah Shrewsbury and what he's doing with this program top to bottom. And, talk about being bullish on Penn State football still for the future, but I am really bullish. I don't know how this season's going to play out in terms of, postseason tournaments or whatever, but the groundwork is clearly being laid for a successful program here and a long-term successful program with this basketball team. And I just, again, I'm really impressed with the way they're fighting. And by the way, Penn State hockey, after the very rough start and, against 2 really good programs, but they are now quickly righting the ship. And much the same thing. I just feel like it took them a little while to kind of figure out, okay, this is what we can do. This is what we need to do. And same thing. I just feel like the recognition of where they are on the ice and what their teammates are doing has improved dramatically from the start of the season to now. And it feels like this is I wasn't so sure about this even a week ago, But it feels like this is a program and a team, again, that is going to be right in the mix here as the winter goes on. And I think January and February are once again going to be a lot of fun here if you're a Penn State hockey fan.
Yeah, I mean, look, the schedule did them absolutely no favors early on, where you've got, especially Michigan is, I think, undisputed the number one program in the country. There was just this confluence of circumstances that let them collect a bunch of top end NHL talent on that roster. And it's okay, guys, here's you're at a top every conference with the number one team in the country. Oh yeah. And you're basically going to open up your season for all intents and purposes by having to play a series against these these guys. Good luck. Right. So your initial impression was maybe not so good, but to your point, it's a long season.
So, again, Goon hopefully be back on Thursday, or I don't know, Booch is going to have to dig deep into the bench here.
It'll be me and Mike the mailman if Goon can't talk, but he assures me he's going to be back by Thursday.
Oh, man, I'm hoping so, and I'll be back again on Tuesday. Man, just a lot of stuff we didn't even get to. It's just been a wild week in sports since
and
I
it's
guess
only
the show
getting
last
crazier
Tuesday.
Because look, with Brent Pry, and congrats to him leaving for Virginia Tech. Obviously there's going to be focus on who replaces him, but I think the other question is there more turnover on the staff? Either Brent takes a couple of guys with him, or like I said, look, I don't want Troutwine fired, and I don't, but his alma mater is going through a coaching transition. Yeah. Could he be tapped to go back and coach at his alma mater where, he won a national championship? You can't blame the guy if home calls. So, this is going to be an interesting couple of weeks here.
Yeah.
In Happy Valley and throughout college football.
Well, and college football, we've been talking a lot about the, with the transfer portal and with the NIL stuff, the way each season is going to be new in terms of where the players are and how all of that plays out. But I think we're also going to see I don't think this is going to be all that uncommon, for as uncommon as it has been, where you have two, again, top six coaches of their own volition saying see ya, and another not on his own volition, but a guy who won a national championship a couple of years ago being forced out. I do think you're going to see more of that, not necessarily two top six coaches every year, but there's an arms race now with everything. And listen, I do think as one school finds a big money booster and says we're going to make a push, Oklahoma State has done that for the last several years, and obviously is all in now this year. But I do think you're going to see, hey, we think we can make our big move now, and we'll go. And I don't think any coach is going to be off the table. I don't rule out I don't know who it would be, but somebody going after Nick Saban and saying, hey, obviously you've done great things at Alabama. What more are you going to prove at Alabama? Come on over to School X and see what you could do. I think you are going to see more big name coaches making moves over the next 5 years, because again, it's just a whole different climate right now. And a bunch of factors that weren't there before are now going to factor in to both coaches and players' decisions from one year to the next. And I don't know if it's necessarily awful, good, indifferent. But it's going to be completely different from the college football world. Well, it already is that we grew up in, where again, you knew pretty much, hey, it's Joe Paterno at Penn State, Bo Schembechler at Michigan, Woody Hayes at Ohio State. I mean, you had a pretty good idea who the coaches were going to be, and that the players were going to be there for 4 or 5 years across the board. And that's just, again, those days are already gone. And again, I think that's that carousel of change is just going to continue at a higher and higher clip here as we hurtle toward the future.
And I will close with a little bit of context for that. Ironhead, we just wrapped up the 135th season of Penn State football. So 135, the venerable age of Nittany Lions football. Do you know how many coaches in program history we have fired for failure to produce on-field results?
I'm going to say 0.
It is 0.
Yeah.
Penn State has never fired a football or, by the way, men's basketball coach, like actually not terminated. There were one or two guys who were probably given an opportunity to seek, other career interests. But at Penn State, we've never fired a coach for not winning enough. So, I mean, when we tell ourselves that we do it differently here, that's not just us blowing smoke where the sun don't shine. Like that, it's true. It's true. There is something different about the way Penn State does things, and I, for one, am happy to keep it that way.
No, I'm with you 100% there. So we'll end on that positive note. Again, hopefully Goon will be back Thursday. Booch will definitely be here. I definitely won't. I will talk to you again on Tuesday.
Come back with 2 dubs.
We're going to try to do exactly that. Until then, be good and be safe.
Lion Country Kia is offering exceptional deals on your new Kia during Kia's Command the Season event.
We have a nice selection on the 2021 Kia Sportage with various options and prices as low as $26,800, saving you $3,000. Or if you demand big power and towing capacity, slip into one of the 2021 Kia Sorentos available on our lot, starting at $32,680.
Discover why Kia drivers throughout the area come to Lion Country Kia or visit online at lioncountrykia.com.
Quaker Steak and Lube is throwing open the garage doors and setting up the umbrellas. It's patio season. Come enjoy great food, drinks, and fun in the sun. There's always something happening at Quaker Steak and Lube, but we're really amping up our event calendars for our favorite time of year. Visit thelube.com to find out what's happening at your local lube this season. Lunch, happy hour, dinner, or late night, indoors or outside, at Quaker Steak and Lube, you'll always find big flavors, friendly faces, and lots of fun.
Hi, Johnny Broom here. If you're in the market for a new Hyundai or a pre-owned car, truck, van, or SUV, nobody beats a Blaze Alexander deal. But don't take my word for it.
Hey, Goon says tell him Johnny sent you.
Hey, tell him Johnny sent ya.
Tell him Johnny sent you.
Wait, tell him Juan or tell him Johnny sent you?
Tell him Johnny sent you.
Here at Bill Pickles Tap Room, we say,
tell him Johnny sent you.
And remember,